how can we amend the broader psychological criterion so as to avoid these terrible results? Avoid saying that strict identity is asymmetric or intransitive in this kind of case, called a fission case. Well, how we amend it is going to depend on what result we want. It's going to depend on what we want to say, what result we want for this case. And it's not at all clear in this case what result we do want. It was pretty clear, remember, in the general officer-boy case what result we wanted. The general is the boy. What do we want to say about this case? Not so obvious. Let me go over some different proposals and see how they sound. First thing we could say is what's going on here is that Eve is not lefty and Eve is not righty. Eve doesn't exist after she teleports. That's something that could be said. It sounds a bit wrong, though. I mean, remember that if that right booth weren't turned on, then, according to the psychological criterion, Eve would exist after she teleports. That would just be a way of traveling to Mars. So, without the right booth switched on, Eve is fine. It's just a fast way of traveling to Mars. Isn't it then strange to say, well, I can ensure that she doesn't survive just by turning that right booth on? Imagine that I disliked Eve, I was her enemy, and I discovered she was going to teleport to Mars, a way that we agree preserves, is such that it's a process you can survive. And then I say, aha, I can make it the case that she won't survive this just by turning on that right booth. Isn't that kind of crazy? Isn't it the case that by turning on the right booth, I'm just creating more of Eve? More of what's great about traveling to Mars. Should Eve, if she hears I'm about to turn on the right booth, go, no, no, then I won't survive? That seems wrong. So, getting the idea as a result that Eve isn't lefty and isn't righty, which we can, of course, we can do that just by adding to the psychological criterion that there can't be branching. Roughly, we'd say that A is B, if and only if A is strongly psychologically continuous with B, and there's no C that exists at the same time as B, also at T2, such that A is strongly psychologically continuous with C. We can get that result, but it doesn't seem like the result we want. What is the result we want? Well, other possibilities. Maybe Eve is lefty, but Eve is not righty, and lefty is not righty. You could say that, but it's not at all clear what makes Eve lefty and not righty. I mean, the situation is symmetrical. There's nothing special about lefty's relationship to Eve that righty doesn't also have in relation to Eve. So what makes her one but not the other? Likewise, what would make her righty but not lefty? Doesn't seem like there's anything that would make her righty but not lefty. So it can't be that she's one but not the other. What else could we say? Well, maybe we could say that Eve survives as both. Maybe we could say that before the teleporting, she weighed 135 pounds. She had 2 hands, 1 nose, 2 eyes, and so forth. And after teleporting, she weighs 270 pounds, and she has 4 hands, and 4 eyes, and 2 noses, and so on and so forth. She's a big, spatially distributed creature. We can say that. It doesn't sound right, though. I mean, do we really want to say of lefty and righty after they've come out of the teleporter that they're both parts, proper parts of one big, spatially distributed person? I mean, as time goes by and they start to develop different personalities, have different experiences, they look, to all intents and purposes, like they're 2 different people. Why would we want to say that lefty and righty uniquely are proper parts of one big person? They think different thoughts. This big person, whoever she is a very strangely dislocated psychology, where aspects of her mental state are communicating with other aspects of her mental state. the more we fill this out, the more pressure it comes to be to think that no, there isn't one person here who's got both lefty and righty as parts. So what else can we say? We're running out of options here. I mean, it's possible that we could say, well, no, Eve is lefty and Eve is righty. And also lefty is righty. It's not that they're both parts of a big person. No, they're just the same person existing at two places in space. So the idea here roughly would be just as a person can exist at the same space, in the same point in space at different points in time, so a person can exist at the same point in time at different places in space. That would be the idea. But again, it's hard to see. That doesn't seem right when we imagine lefty and righty starting to argue. They will argue about possessions. That's almost inevitable. About spouses, there's going to be trouble. When they start to argue like that, I mean, do we really want to say, oh no, it's one person arguing with herself? Maybe at first that sounds right, but now suppose that lefty goes off to college and becomes an engineer, righty goes off to college and becomes a poet. Suppose they develop very different personalities. Do we really want to say, oh yes, there's one person here, and then there's another person here and it's the same person? No, they are, for all intents and purposes, different people. So it looks like we've just run out of options. It looks like there's no good thing to say. Parfit, in the reading for today, agreed with this. He said, there's no really good thing to say. The best of all the bad things to say is perhaps that Eve doesn't survive the process, that she isn't lefty and she isn't righty, that she's nobody at all. She doesn't exist after the teleporting. But, said Parfit, don't let that get you too worried about teleporting. He said that what this shows is that our concept of identity is such that identity isn't what really should matter to us when we look forward and we care about our prospects and we care about our survival. Because, said Parfit, Eve, although when she looks forward to double teleporting, she should think, I'm not going to exist in the future. Neither of those future lefty or righty, neither of them is me. She should still feel happy about her prospects. She should still feel that I'm getting what I want when I reasonably care about survival. What I want is given to me by lefty and given to me yet more by righty. So she shouldn't fear her impending double teleportation as death and think, oh my gosh, she shouldn't sweat and think this is like being executed. No, she should think I'm getting lots of what I want, albeit there are going to be some complications concerning who signs the checks. And so this shows that reasonably wanting it to be the case that you survive doesn't amount to wanting it to be the case that you exist in the future. And for Parfit, this was a revisionary thought. He said that we've gone around all this time very, very concerned about our future existence. And we should have been concerned with something a little bit different. Not our future existence, but the existence of future people whose mental states in the future are psychologically continuous with our mental states now. That's what we should really have been caring about all along. Now, that's fine and good, and maybe Parfit's right. I'd like you to think about whether you see any other option, whether you can see if you can find a way to make sense of the idea that, literally speaking, Eve exists after the teleporting. And I want to float, in anticipating next time's discussion. Next time, the last time's discussion. We're nearly there. It's going to be last time next time. I want to float one more proposal, one that Parfit didn't consider, and that's this. Yeah, there's a creature, a thing, before the teleporting that survives the teleportation. But not just one such creature. What's going on is this. Yeah, Lefty was around before teleporting. righty was around before teleporting, but lefty isn't righty. In fact, before teleporting, there were two things there. Lefty was around and righty was around, and they're different things. Before teleporting, they were very close together. When I say very close together, I don't just mean sort of bundled up next to each other. I mean, they had all the same parts. It was kind of like, if you remember, we talked about the person and the organism in the last lecture, according to the Lockean view. According to the Lockean view, there's a person here who wasn't a fetus, and there's an organism here who was a fetus. So by Leibniz's law, because the person has a property that the organism doesn't, it looks like there are two things here, a person and an organism. The person is not strictly identical to the organism. And yet, these two things, they're not just sort of nudged up next to each other. Everything that's a part of the one is a part of the other. So the person has a hand, the organism has a hand. The person has a right leg, the organism has a right leg. That's how it is with righty and lefty before teleporting. Everything that's a part of, we would say, is a part of Eve, is a part of lefty and a part of righty. It's after teleporting that they have different features. So when I, before teleporting, say, hi Eve, I'm really saying hi to two people, lefty and righty. And one of them is going to go left after teleporting, and the other is going to go right after teleporting. This proposal was proposed by a philosopher who was writing, or who wrote this piece after Parfit, maybe David Lewis, as a response to Parfit's worry about fission. And he said, this is a way of preserving our idea that in caring about surviving, we are caring about there existing in the future a person who is strictly identical to us now. That wanting to survive is tantamount to wanting it to be the case that you exist in the future. And so he said, by thinking about this way about fission cases, we can keep the idea that what matters in survival is identity. Now, Lewis's proposal is very neat and ingenious if you can really get your head around the idea that there can be two people existing in exactly the same space at exactly the same time with all the same parts. This is sometimes called the multiple occupancy view. But the multiple occupancy view has a host of interesting quirky features, and we'll talk about some of those in the last lecture next time.